Okay.
For fuck's sake.
Should you do the breath? Or?
I'll do the breath.
Okay.
All right. Wherever you are, friends, let's take a really mindful breath together to just help us drop in to this present moment. Taking an inhale through the nose and let it all go out of the mouth. Trying not to breathe that deep breath into the microphone.
Before we start this episode, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the same land in which I've always had the privilege of calling home. I extend my deepest respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Yes, thank you for taking a breath with us and kicking off. What episode are we up to?
I think 6,
Woo!
maybe. Woo, time is flying.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
All right, Zoe, this is a big topic to cover today.
Today's a great conversation. I'm actually so excited because Melbourne is pumping at the moment. We've just come out of finals footy, grand final, heading into spring racing carnival, Melbourne Cup, and it's spring and it's starting to get a little bit warmer. So, this is a very topical conversation. And
Vibes are high, and because we're such social butterflies as well, like I froth the energy of this time of the year, and it's very difficult, I find, sometimes to like pull back and say no, because I'm like, I just want to do it all and be part of it all. But anyway.
Which I guess is very much what we're going to talk about today, how we kind of grapple with these two wants. But before we do that, let's check in. What's keeping you rushing at the moment, darling?
My washing basket.
Really
Honestly,
wasn't sure where you were going with that.
It just feels like it doesn't empty. I do like 3 loads of washing, and then 2 days later I need to do 3 more. I think it's because we train so much. Like I'm going through so much activewear, but also just life. There's so many things going on at the moment that I just feel like I can never get on top of my washing, and I'm a single person that I'm doing washing for. So I often think about families and kids, especially kids, because they're so messy, and it just is that chore in the household that feels like it is literally never ending. And then it's the putting away of the clothes.
It's the worst bit.
Mate, the putting away of the clothes is the biggest bane of my existence, to the point that like sometimes my room is like Mount Everest but clothes. It's just always this never-ending chore.
Which is actually the worst. That's the worst feeling, when you don't feel like you can get on top of something. Are you the kind of person who separates your whites from your colours?
Absolutely.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, always got to do that. But that at the moment is very, very a constant for me. What about you? What's keeping you rushing, Zoga?
What's keeping me rushing? Well, at the moment, and very topical for today specifically, is feeling as though I'm living out of my car. So I know I mentioned in the last episode, I think, that we're considering our living situation at the moment because we do so much in the city, but we live down the coast, which means that when I drive up to the city, I try my best to like bunch appointments and things together, and that often means that I'll stay overnight or a couple of nights, which means that I always have to be like 3 steps ahead. I'm always packing a bag, considering what I might need for the next couple of days, and that is exhausting for the mental load. And then the worst part is that you forget something and you're like, oh, now I'm stuck, and it's usually an item of clothing, like a jacket or something, and I'm freezing for 3 days. So I've gotten into the habit of just keeping my car kind of stocked with all of the basic things that I might need at a certain point in time. But yeah, it's tiring. And then also just sleeping between places, like, and I won't go into the details of this. We have lots of different places that we stay when we come up to the city, but it reminds me because last year we put our house up on Airbnb just to kind of see what happens, and someone actually booked it for 6 months. So we spent 6 months living out of suitcases, out of our cars, in different beds all the time, and it was exhausting. Amazing for many other reasons, but exhausting. And so
just unsettling.
So unsettling. And yeah, so now it almost makes it like even harder because it just keeps reminding me of that massive chunk of time.
Can we just talk for one moment about the infestation that occurred off the back of that period too?
Yeah, we can.
That was wild.
Wow, this is, I mean, there's a bit of drama wrapped up in this. It's probably a whole other episode, but yeah, so we rented, as I said, our house out for 6 months, and we came back to what the pest control people said was the worst mice infestation they have ever seen. So
it was wild.
It was absolutely insane. You guys, I'm talking like mice through the doona covers and all of the bed sheets, like in the beds, between the couch, in the couch cushions, like behind the fridge, the washing machine, like every single place that a mice could be, it was.
And there were like thousands.
It was. Yeah, really intense. Anyway,
sorry to bring that up.
Feeling a little triggered. No, that was a really strange time of my life because, yeah. But it was a purge. It was a great purge because we obviously had to part ways with so many of our possessions that were just kind of ruined. But anyway, we won't get into the details of that now because we'd be here all day. But I was just the final thing on having all of my stuff in my car all the time. I just obviously have to mention what just happened like an hour ago, which is that I pull up out the front of ANNOTATE where we're recording now, and I have a big bag of things that I want to bring inside. I've got my laptop, and I'd picked up smoothies for all of us on my way here, which meant that I was actually 15 minutes late, which I hate being late, although Guy will tell you that I'm always late. And as I'm grabbing my bag out of the car, I go to pick up the tray of smoothies. And of course, in slow motion, Amy's smoothie just tips itself all into the carpet of my car, so in the driver's seat, all over the pedals of my car, this passion fruit smoothie. And isn't it like, I don't know, I'm sure people can relate to this, when you just want to do one trip. You don't want to have to take your bag and then come back to the car and get the smoothies. It's like, no, I'm going to do this. I do it with my groceries all the time. And
especially when you're in a rush.
When you're in a rush, exactly.
You know you're late. You're like, okay, I need to get in there. Like, let's go.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
like
15 minutes late, so I got to hurry up here. And then all of a sudden, the next 15 minutes is spent hosing down the floor mats of my car, which is covered in milky smoothie.
The universe's way of saying slow down.
I know, but as Kane said, it's like a metaphor for life, right? Isn't it true that you can just hose it off and start again?
Love that.
So
Kane with the wisdom.
Yeah, so that's
Kane,
where we're at.
for context, is Amy's partner from ANNOTATE. Just FYI. Legend.
Shout out to Kane. We love you. Okay, so with all of that in mind, yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about the sort of contradiction of our own social lives. We know that, like, we all know how important it is to have a good social network, to feel really connected and to have fun and to let loose and not take life so seriously. But what we notice is that often that can actually come at a cost, because sometimes upholding your social life and a career and a relationship and everything in between can actually be kind of exhausting and keep you rushing. And especially as we're moving into silly season, and to Megsy's point, it's like such a great time. There's so much energy, but then you almost have to grapple with what comes with that, in having to spend a lot of money and buy new outfits all the time and maintain your appearance and your hair
nails and your brows.
Oh my goodness. And then, and then for those who drink and party, be hungover and lose a day or two a week to your hangover and all of that stuff. So that's sort of what we're going to talk about today. Have I missed anything?
No,
is that, yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
By the way, your brows are looking fab.
Thank you. I did just get them tinted. Yeah.
They look really, really good.
Thank you so much. You know when you get them done the first day and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, like they're extra dark.
Yeah, they're extra dark, but they'll fade. Give it a day or two. But thanks for noticing.
So, yeah, with that said, Zoe, speaking on the topic of alcohol, I think this is a great way to kind of kick this conversation off, because, as you said, with all of these social outings and sun shining, I mean, I know the way that alcohol kind of influences my experience in this time and energy of just good vibes. How does it influence you, and what is your relationship to alcohol?
Yeah, this is a great question, and of course really relevant at this time of year, but actually at all times of year. So I think like many people growing up in Australia and probably many other places as well, is that I started drinking from a pretty young age, maybe 15, I would say. Like alcohol became a kind of common substance that we would use on the weekends. And yeah, that was just very normal. It's kind of just what you do as you evolve through your teenagehood, and then of course you eventually turn 18, and then you have all the freedom to buy all the alcohol that you want, and all of the trouble that you get up to through that process. And also like my brother always worked in the nightclub industry while I was growing up. So, it was kind of this double-edged sword because I'd know all the bouncers personally, and it would just like depend on the night. Sometimes I'd rock up there with my fake ID and they'd look at me like, oi, go home. And I'd be like, fuck. But sometimes they're like, come on, in you come. And so, yeah, that was very much the norm for me, just drinking a lot on the weekends, specifically binge drinking, right? My relationship to alcohol has always been in a binge capacity. I'm not the type of person to have just one wine here and there, although as I've gotten a little bit older, that's probably changed. But, back in the day, it was solely binge drinking for me. It's like I'm going hard or not at all. And of course, I've come to learn so much through hindsight and looking back on that time. But I think for many people, or maybe not, maybe it's just me, I certainly used alcohol as a way of feeling more confident and perhaps quelling some of my social anxiety, and that actually led to a lot of destructive behavior, like a lot of destructive behavior. I would go out and party and have massive benders that would move into the next day, and go to festivals. I was always known in my friendship group for being the one who likes to go doofing, which I still very much like to do. But yeah, as I said, that definitely led me to some pretty destructive behaviors. And I got to this point, would have been, actually I don't really have a concept of time on this. It would have been similar to when Guy and I first started officially sort of dating, because we were friends before that. So let's say, 8 years ago or something, I started to realize that actually all of the bad things that were happening in my life were as a result of me drinking and partying. And I started to realize actually that was a bit of a problem. And I would not say that I had a problem with alcohol per se. As I said, it was kind of binge drinking only. But I guess around a similar-ish time, I was practicing a lot of yoga and started to become a little more reflective. My career was changing. That was when I started teaching yoga full-time as opposed to working in an advertising agency, which of course is very fueled by alcohol consumption in that type of culture, that work culture, or at least it was back then. And yeah, I started to recognize that actually binge drinking in this capacity was really living out of alignment with my values, and I started to really question what the function of alcohol was in my life. And I decided to go sober for, I think I'd set myself a goal of, maybe it was a year. Gosh, I'm going back so long now, I can barely remember. But yeah, I think I decided to do a year of not drinking. And I did that successfully. In fact, I think I ended up going nearly 2 years actually. And as I said, Guy and I had first sort of started dating at this point, and we actually did that together. For at least a year of that, we did that together. And that was amazing, because what a beautiful way to build a relationship
Absolutely.
That's not dependent on partying and alcohol, which a lot of because Guy and I were actually friends for about 8 years before we got together. And, a lot of our friendship, as with most of my friendships, was based around alcohol and partying and drinking. So that was really nice. But yeah, I learned so much through that period of my life of sobriety. And one of the major influences in that was a book that I read called This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. It's I'm sure that people have heard of the smoking book. People want to quit smoking and you read this book. I think it's called by Alan Carr. I can't remember what the name of the book is. I think it's actually just Quit Smoking. And it's meant to, I guess, help you understand the psychology of the habit and to help you break the habit essentially. And I read that book, and that created a whole new lens through which I actually saw alcohol and what it means to drink, and that really helped.
What was the biggest thing you learnt from it, would you say?
Well,
Or that you took from that book?
There's so many things. And I actually encourage everyone to read it.
Yeah.
It really is interesting.
I think it would almost scare me.
Yeah.
I want to avoid it because I'm like, I don't want to, it's like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and that's actually sort of the point. So the general theme of the book is actually recognizing that alcohol dependence, like a dependence on alcohol, is not limited to what we would name an alcoholic, but that actually alcohol affects the brain in such a way that casual drinkers can very much get trapped in the cycle of dependence, but often without actually knowing it. And that was massive for me because I was like, I don't feel like I have a problem with alcohol. I could easily not drink. It's more the FOMO and the feeling as though I can't go out with my friends because I don't feel like I could cope without alcohol and the confidence that it gives and the kind of fear jacket that it provides. It was like
what we were saying the other day where it's like, I was saying to you, the thing is I actually just love wine.
Yeah.
Like I actually just love the way that it looks in the glass and like the taste and that nice warm fuzzy feeling and the habit that I've created around like watching the footy with a glass of wine on a Friday night or whatever. But that's part of it, right?
Well, yeah. And that was probably the biggest thing that I took away actually, because it's like so many people have, and myself, I was included in this, have that argument, but I just love the taste. I just love getting home from the day and just having a sip of wine. And it's like, well, yeah, but actually that's a conditioned behavior because really if you think back to the first time that you ever tasted alcohol. Do you remember the first time you ever tried alcohol? Because I do. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, because actually it's poison, right? Alcohol is a form of poison. That's how it works. That's how it creates this altered state in the body because it influences our bloodstream. And really what she mentions in the book is that we are conditioned into believing that we like the taste of alcohol because we train ourselves to like the taste. And we almost trick ourselves into believing, but alcohol relaxes me.
It's a form of helping me slow down. I think I spoke about that on a previous episode. You asked me what's helping me to slow down and I answered having wine with my housemate, which is wild.
Yeah. Which is, it's interesting, of course, because again, that's a learned, conditioned response to alcohol, which of course alcohol has real physiological impacts or influence over the body. But really the idea is that in the long run it does more harm than it does good. There's so much more to this and I'm actually dating my mind back pretty far to remember the details of the book. So I encourage people to go and read it. Don't take my word for it. And I want to also be really clear that I don't demonize alcohol. I don't think that anyone who drinks alcohol is less than me because actually where I've landed now is that I still do drink alcohol. So the perspective of the book very much is through the lens of, well, you don't need alcohol in the way that you think you do. And I'm pretty sure that her approach is very much all or nothing in that just once you realize the psychology of drinking and what it actually does to your body, that you're just better off without it. And that's what I did for a period of time, and I am so glad that I did that.
Can I ask you a question on that? What was it in that period of time, like, when you weren't drinking for nearly 2 years? How did you feel, and like what was present for you, and who were you as a person?
Well, the first thing that I noticed almost immediately was that I now existed inside of a 7-day week, which previously was a 5.5, 6-day week because the hangover that I would experience on a Sunday that would trickle into the Monday, is
no good.
Yeah, whatever the word is, it's no good, right? It just strips you of a full day. Like you're incompetent.
And now for me, if I'm hung, it's not even a full day. It's like sometimes it's 2 days.
Yeah. So keep in mind we're going back to my early 20s at this point, right? So yeah, exactly. Now it's way worse. So that was the main thing. I was like, oh my gosh, Sundays are a day in which I can actually do the things that make me feel good and happy, and I can go into my week feeling regulated and productive and like my mental health is thriving. So that was a massive part, but I'd be lying if I said that it was easy because of course the social implications of not drinking are insane, and you come to realize that actually you can be okay with you not drinking, but everyone else has a problem with it. And I think that this is very much the way that the book is framed, in that everyone deep down knows that alcohol isn't good for them, right? I think we all somewhere in there kind of know that it's not 100% good for us. And yet because we all do it and it makes us feel good, even if that's just short term, we all want to justify why we should and could keep doing it. And so when someone says, oh, I'm not drinking, and it's not because they're pregnant or because they had an addiction, but actually just because they've decided, which was me, that is quite confronting for people because it causes them to question their own relationship. And so what I notice is that I would say, oh, I'm not drinking. And the response is, oh, why? Are you pregnant? Why aren't you drinking? Oh my God, what do you mean you're not drinking? Just have a drink. Who cares? Let your hair down, kick back. And I'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm good. Right. But that took me a long time to get to that point where the peer pressure or the social pressure didn't like really kick me down because it's really hard to feel like you're on the outside. And I'd notice people wouldn't invite me to things because, oh, you're not drinking. And I just didn't know if you'd want to come because we're all going to be drinking. It's like, let that be my choice. I'll say no if I don't feel comfortable. But what actually happened through time as I started to get more comfortable with it and more comfortable in my own capacity to be in situations where everyone else is drunk and I'm sober is that I learnt that I can have so much fun without alcohol. And I had a number of instances where I would be on the dance floor of a nightclub. Prince of Wales is coming to mind. I remember this one night we all went out to Prince. It was 5:30 in the morning. I had my car keys in my bag because I had driven because I was not drinking. And I was having the best time at 5:30 in the morning on the waters. And, and then I drove home, and got into bed and was like, all right. Off to sleep I go. I had a big sleep, woke up the next day and was like, all right, what am I doing today?
I envy that because I have probably never been able to do that, actually. Not even probably never. Like I am the polar opposite. I'm the one that's on the dance floor till 5:30 in the morning and then I'm like, where are we going now?
Yeah.
Wow. I admire that you have done that. It's a really it's a really tough thing to take on in an environment where we are very social creatures. We derive joy and satisfaction from being in that fun, energetic, playful place. And a lot of those places do revolve around being in bars or on dance floors or at festivals or at events. And I've always really struggled with the idea of being able to take part in that without being fueled by alcohol or partying or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really, like, it took time. It definitely took time. And I actually can't remember what made me decide then to start drinking again. But I also, there's a couple of things that I haven't mentioned yet. So what it did through that 2-year time was, as I said, teach me that actually I don't need alcohol. I can still have a really fun, fulfilling life. I can still go out. I can still party, right? But what it then did, even when I did start to introduce alcohol back into my life, it just completely changed my relationship to it. And now, as it stands, obviously there's many years later, and actually since that 2-year period, I went and did another year later, and now it's kind of tricky because for me to feel like drinking, it really does not happen often. Sometimes it does. Sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, I've, got a friend's hen's party or whatever I've got on, and I'm like, oh, I'm great. I can't wait. This is going to be fun. And I'll happily drink and I'll have a good time and I'll kind of call it when I'm ready to call it and never push myself beyond what I want to do. But the challenging part is that doesn't happen often. And so these days I'll have a social event and I'll often notice myself thinking, oh, I really wish that I was kind of in the mood. And I think also because I'm a little bit older now, and whilst I'll still go and still have heaps of fun, it is that little bit more exhausting now, and I'll notice myself probably wanting to go home a little bit earlier. And sometimes I get in this sort of wrestle with myself where I'm like, no, I just kind of feel like I wish I felt like getting around it a little bit more. And so that's why this kind of silly season time, I don't know what it's going to be like for me over the next couple of months, because I might be really kind of feeling it and wanting to party a little bit and get up and about, but I also really might not. And so what I'm getting better at is when I don't feel like it, I don't. And like, that's okay. And I don't let the FOMO kind of wash over me as much.
Okay, so how do you do that? What is it? Because I need to know. I'm the polar opposite.
It doesn't feel like a really active choice at this point. It feels like all of the work that I've put in the past and actually taught myself that it's really okay to not force myself into partying. Like it's mindset. It's all in the mindset.
And I think it's like, that word FOMO is obviously quite prevalent in this conversation because that's ultimately a big part of what it is. I am a massive FOMO person. Like I am always worried about, I'm going to miss out. But what I always think about FOMO is that it's a temporary emotion.
Yeah.
And every time that I've avoided something and I've gone, okay, I'm not going to let FOMO win this time. I'm actually going to do the stay home thing and just chill or, just say no. I will have woken up the next day and my mates will be deeply, awfully just in the worst state, hung. And I'm like, yes, I
feel good. Yeah. And yeah, it's, I think what I've really, like the thing for me is just boundaries, like having the courage to really listen to what I need and to honor that and not kind of force myself to do things. But as I said, that sometimes comes at a cost because I really miss the old version of myself that was way more happy-go-lucky and yeah, now I'm having a few wines and now I am going to stay out really late tonight. Like, and I still do that every now and again, but I do miss that version of myself. But I think when you have the experience of not drinking for a bit and feeling so good, because that was the other part of your question, right? Like, who was I during that time? I felt so well. I felt so clear in my mind. My mental health was so much more stable. My relationships were better because I wasn't doing dumb shit that was getting me into trouble. I wasn't making poor decisions. And so everything in my life just felt better. And I think because I had that experience, it now feels a lot harder for me to kind of be more spontaneous and happy-go-lucky because I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like on both sides, and feeling good is pretty hard to beat.
Yeah.
Even though those nights can be so fun and really entertaining and there's so many memories that can be made, that it can be like a hard payoff sometimes. And as I said, sometimes I do make the choice where, I'm going for this here and it's going to be great. And I very rarely regret it, right? But it does feel harder to lean into those nights on the nights where I don't feel like it just because I know how good it feels when I do say no. But the bigger part of all of this as well, and this really comes back in hindsight, is my dad's relationship to alcohol. So my dad stopped drinking kind of cold turkey. I'm not quite sure how old I would have been. I want to say in my very early teenage years, maybe somewhere between kind of 10 and 14. I'm not sure. But he made a really conscious decision to stop drinking because he recognized that alcohol was starting to become a need to have rather than a nice to have. And that's a generational thing. His father, I believe, was an alcoholic. And he started to notice some similarities in his own behaviour and very courageously decided, well, that's it, I'm not drinking anymore. And he stuck to that for the rest of his life.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I had grown up watching my dad exist inside of social situations where they'd have dinner parties and friends over and lots of alcohol and people around, and he would be sober, and he was so okay and comfortable with his decision in that. And that was really admirable. So I think that probably influenced me without me knowing it so much. But also the reverse of that kind of tells me that, well, if there is, in my family a history of alcohol dependence, then I don't want to fall into that. And as I said, my decision to stop drinking really was not because I felt as though I had a dependence on it. And now I'm so far in the other direction that this is not a concern for me at all. But I think that also influenced and maybe does still influence my decision-making around alcohol as well, just because, that is a part of my family history, and it's not something that I want for my life.
Yeah, and I think that recognising that is so powerful because it's like what you said, going back to what you said about the feeling good thing. I relate to that so much because I've made a few kind of comments as if I'm like, like a drink every day, but I definitely, I'm a very social alcohol consumer, and it is few and far between for me these days when I have like a massive night. It's like really I've learnt to, well, also being so much older and having so much work commitment, like I just don't have capacity to be feeling shit and feeling hungover. So I've gotten a lot better at the picking of battles and, you know, knowing if I'm going to my mate's wedding, all right, it's a big one here. We're going to let the hair down. So I'm going to be really conscious of the way that I respond, or, you know, I'll make sure I have some charcoal tablets and I've got some orange Powerade ready to go the next day in the fridge and things like that. Right. But, it is that feeling good, you know, being able to show up in the world as the best possible version of yourself every day, not just 5 days a week, is so good.
But where does your relationship to alcohol start? Like, what's been your history of, obviously this is where you are now, but what about in the past?
Well, yeah, you know, speaking about alcohol being inherently part of your family dynamics, your friendship circles, like I grew up around alcohol being consumed quite a lot. Not like my parents by no means, you know, my dad's passed away now, but massive consumers of alcohol. But my mum, there's always a red wine cabinet stocked in our house, and she just loves red wine. Every night she drinks red wine. It's like, that's her thing. Yeah. And
very, very generational.
Yeah.
I think our parents, very normal for our parents' generation to have.
Yeah. And she's got her same little wine glass. She loves her little Shiraz. She drinks it in front of the telly every night, and that's just that's her way of slowing down. And so, you know, you see that. And then I started drinking, you know, you asked earlier, like, what was the taste of alcohol for the first time? I remember the first time I ever got drunk. I was about 14. I was in high school, and it was on guava cruises, just necking them back. And you know, what's that thing where you put the pipe on? But beer.
Oh, yeah.
Snorkels.
Snorkels.
Thanks, Ames. Yes. Was doing all of that kind of stuff, just a silly little teenager. And I remember being so drunk, I sat in a green ant's nest. This is up in Darwin, obviously where I grew up. And I had these welts all over me. I was so sick, and I was sleeping over my girlfriend's Chloe's house at the time. Her mum always tells this story, Jenny. So they've taken me home, and her mum's got me in the bath naked. I'm 14, and I've got these welts all over me, and I'm like sloshing around everywhere just like an absolute trollop. And that was the first time I ever got drunk. And her mum was just like, oh, God, what do we have on our hands here? But that was the first of many of those moments as a teenager, binge drinking. What's that song? Binge drinking is very bad. I think it's like
binge drinking is very bad.
So, yeah, same as you. I grew up from a very young age, binge drinking, going out, fake IDs, night clubbing from the age of 16. It was a big part of my existence as a teen. And then I think, you know, as I spoke about a little bit in our previous episode talking about psoriasis and what I went through with that journey, you know, that because it was already such a big part of my life, that then became my outlet for leaning into learning how to go forward. I was in such a bad way mentally that I didn't have that toolkit. So instead I just leaned on anything to help me numb any of the pain that I felt. So alcohol, and just, you know, everything that comes with that was the path that I went down into. And you mentioned the word destructive. My word, have I been a very destructive human in my time? And only really up until recently, you know, like I would say it wasn't until I got to my early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, when I was in that really bad place with my mental health. And I was like, I cannot keep doing this to myself. Like, I need to change my ways. And similarly to you now, as time's gotten older and I've really learned how much more I value wellness and well-being, and how I've learned to play with my mind and I've learned how to control it. And I've just grown, you know, as you do as you age. But now I am the same. Like, I love to wake up on a Sunday and go to the markets and feel good. And so for me, I'm just selective with when I go down the drinking excessively path nowadays. But I think it does similarly to you, concern me a little bit with what we know we've got coming up as we lead into this period, because it is traditionally always a bit of a time, like work tapers off a fair bit for me with kind of the footy things drying up and the sun's shining and I love being in it. When the sun is shining and the days are longer, there's nothing I love more than sitting at Blue Tongue, our local little wine bar where I live in Elwood, and having an Aperol with all my mates and just having a full yarn and gas bag about life and the world. And then that sometimes tends to evolve. And so that's where I need to make more conscious choices now. It's like in the past, what I would find myself doing is, and in the recent past is, in that instance where you can get carried away, that's what I'm really working on at the moment is like the willpower, learning on actually, okay, it's okay to go home. You're actually not going to miss out on anything.
Yeah.
Have a couple of drinks if you want, but like let that be it. Like don't then make a plan to go to the next bar and the next place and then kick on to the next thing. Like nothing, what's that saying? Like nothing good really ever happens after hours in that setting.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, and something that I really learned through going sober for a bit is this idea of the black and white, and how for some people black and white is really important, right? For some people they need to draw the line in the sand. My dad, for example, he recognised he's not the kind of person that can live in the grey area of just having 1 or 2 drinks and calling it a day. And so he decided, that's it, I don't drink anymore, and that's final. And that's what I did for a period of time, which was I'm not going to drink for a couple of years, I'm going to keep it black and white. But actually life is so inherently grey, and it's so important that we as human beings learn how to live in the grey area. And I'm not, as I said, it's really important that everyone kind of looks at their own relationship to alcohol or whatever it is really individually and determine what's right for you. But that practice of just being okay with having a couple of drinks and then calling it is so beneficial in all areas of life. Like, what does it mean to be in but not have to be all in, right? But actually just to be in a little bit and then to be able to step back out when I want to, and to feel as though I have enough control to make those decisions autonomously for myself. And yeah, I guess that's sort of, I'm trying to live in the grey area a little bit as well, but I find it hard to stay out of the black and white because fuck, the white feels good.
Yeah, totally. And that's exactly what I was about to say. Like when I talk about core values, right, and we talk about core values a lot, I feel like having an understanding of my values, which in fact is something that we will talk a lot more about on this podcast as well. I feel like core values and understanding them is an episode in itself. But fortunately I was kind of taught about core values in previous employment history. And so I've got a really strong sense of what my core values are. And one of my top tier core values has and always will be fun. Mm-hmm. I'm a natural born wild child, to the point that I think I'm going to get wild child tattooed on me somewhere, because I never want to lose that part of myself. I love adventure and like going out. There's like so much. Some of my best friends and some of the best people in the world that I'm still connected to are people that I've met in a nightclub toilet, just talking so much shit when you're waiting to go to the bathroom, or like, are out, or like when I've been traveling and you open yourself up to these experiences when you're in that social kind of setting. And so that's sometimes what I grapple with is like, I know that most of the time, like certainly don't get me wrong, I've had big nights out before where I've woken up with mad demons, like crazy ones, because of the way that I've behaved and things that I've done. That certainly is part of it. But for the most part, the times that I do go out and I really give it a nudge, I actually have a really, really good time. And that seems to sometimes be my justification. It's like if I do go out, have a bit of a big night, and then, I wake up in the morning and I'm scrolling Uber Eats and I'm just about to put my order in for 6 hash browns and a Happy Meal, I say to myself, oh, well, at least I had fun. And that's not that isn't living in alignment with who I ultimately am as a human. Like, and again, that doesn't happen often these days.
But I mean, maybe it is and it isn't at the same time.
Yeah.
And maybe that is a part of the grey area.
Yeah.
Actually kind of being okay with being a little bit of a contradiction.
Yeah.
In that this,
with being a wild child at heart.
this both aligns and doesn't align simultaneously, and I'm okay with that. Not always, perhaps, but yeah. And I think this is good because I guess this is where I differ from that a little bit, and which hopefully helps our listeners kind of identify with their unique situation. But I feel like my wild child era was incredible, you guys. I had a wonderful youth. But for me now, I feel like I'm really content with that era of my life. And now I'm in a slightly different season, or at least I have been in a slightly different season, which has been way more focused on you know, yoga and you know, all of the things. And then knowing that season might change again too, and maybe that will evolve into something different. Something that I've really noticed or I have a distaste for lately is that I feel like because I really am not drinking that much, I'm often avoiding going to festivals or concerts or live music events because I'm like, I don't feel like I've got the energy. But actually, festivals and live music are like my favorite thing in the whole world. And so my current challenge for myself is that actually, no, buy the ticket to the festival, buy the ticket to the event, see how you feel on the day. If you feel like partying, go for it. And if you feel like going sober, then go for that. But don't miss out on these experiences, especially living in Melbourne. We have such an abundance of things that we can do and experience. Don't miss out on that just because you don't feel like you have the energy for it, because actually that's also an excuse in some way to, you know, to avoid having to confront the fact that sometimes it is a bit hard not to be drinking or whatnot.
And in fact, like rocking up to those things and making the conscious choice to do it sober is actually quite an empowering thing to do. And you will walk away from that feeling like an absolute superhero, because you're like, not only did I go and I had the best time and I was social and I filled my cup up in that way, but also I have woken up feeling great. And
I respected my body.
I respected my temple, and it is a really nice way to give yourself a bit of a pat on the back. Mate, the one thing that inhibits me really a lot these days is the process of actually having to get ready to go out, and the thinking that you have to do in terms of like, what am I going to wear? I have to do my hair and wash it. And
for me, it's not just the getting ready, but it's actually the mental load of like the week or 2 weeks before. And to your point, you said before, this isn't just like when you're just going to the pub after work or whatever, but it's when you have like an event on. And it's like I'm already have so many balls in the air because I'm trying to uphold my career and my relationship. And then all of a sudden I have this event where I don't have an outfit for. So that means a significant portion of my time is now spent scrolling through, you know, because who shops in real life these days? I mean, maybe that's just me because I live down the coast, so it's harder for me.
But I haven't bought a dress for so long. I'm a higher gal through and through.
Yeah, but even that, right? Yeah. That takes time. And then even for me, like the decision of I'm always between sizes. So I'm like,
got to go and try it.
No, I do have to go try it on. And like that takes so much time. And I feel like for guys, I'm often so envious of Guy, my husband, because that is just not a concern for him.
And they just chuck on an outfit. They roll out the door.
They wear the same thing every time.
Have to do their makeup or anything. And they look hot.
Yeah. And he's like, I'm going out tonight. I'm like, well, you would, because you can't. How easy is that? Whereas for me, I'm like, what am I going to wear? Like, do I have time to wear makeup on? Like,
it's a real process for little chickadees.
Yeah, it is exhausting.
It certainly is something that stops me sometimes nowadays too. I'm like, I don't have the energy to go through that process of getting ready. So instead, I would rather stay on my couch. And in fact, I've got to this really nice point in my life now where I certainly, like, I'll let my hair down a little bit here and there, but I feel as though I have a pretty comfortable relationship with alcohol. And, you know, I could probably drink wine less, but it's not out of needing to drink it. It's actually out of enjoying having a glass of wine at dinner. sometimes. And I notice when I do go into a social setting in that mindset, when I'm like, I am going in to actually just have enjoyment versus like, I know when I get reckless, and I have done this recently where I'm just like, I need to fucking have a drink and let my hair down because I've come off the back of a real busy period and I'm like really, really stressed and highly anxious. When I then choose to drink off the back of that is usually where I wake up really regretting things.
Yeah.
And so it's like knowing that now, it's like actually I need to be way more conscious of going into this drinking session because I know I'm not feeling in a good headspace.
Yeah. Oh, it's so important. And I think that some of that does come with age as well, right? I think that like as you move into your 30s from your 20s, like naturally your relationship, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's too general. Maybe that doesn't feel true.
It feels true for me.
Yeah, I certainly know for a lot of the younger generation, well, in fact, I don't know, but I kind of hear and in the conversations I have that there is a lot more, there's many people out there who are sober curious. Yeah, the term, which is a term that came from a book by Ruby Warrington and has since grown in popularity. And it's this idea or a movement that actually encourages people to reflect on the role that alcohol plays in their life. So I haven't read this book personally, but I imagine maybe it's similar to This Naked Mind book I was mentioning earlier. But yeah, it's this idea of being really mindful around your habits and not necessarily choosing not to drink because you have a problem, but actually around this curiosity of like, what would it feel like to be sober, even if that's just for a small portion of time. And my sense of that is that actually the younger generation are far more sober curious. There's a lot of people that I speak to who are a lot younger who actually don't have the same kind of binge drinking culture that I had when I was the same age as them. So I think that, things are shifting and changing as they always do.
Do you think that social media has a part to play in the younger generation being a lot more sober curious? Because when we grew up, we didn't have access to. This is where I believe social media can be really beneficial. There's a lot of things that it comes with the negative with socials, but for a lot of young people, if you're following somebody who maybe is a little bit older, who shares a lot about sobriety and all of these kinds of things, I think there's a lot more influence in that space. Yeah. And I know, like, I've got one of my girlfriends, actually Courtney Ugal. She's a great shining example of somebody who's taken the sobriety path and has done so for quite a few years. And we're actually going to get her on the pod as a guest very, very soon. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with her as well in a lot more depth. But, she shares a lot on her socials about her reasoning for wanting to not drink. And there's a lot of trauma actually associated from her story, and I'm not going to go into it. I'll let her tell her own story. But, for a lot of younger people, they're seeing that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I speak to a lot of young people now that haven't even touched alcohol.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, I think it's access to more influence. But I think it can probably go both ways too, right? I think, to your point, social media does give people access into the inner worlds of far more people than perhaps we had when we were younger. And so there's people who are more sober curious, and promoting that certainly would have an influence. But then I think on the back end of that, of course, social media contributes to so much of young people's anxiety and poor self-esteem. And for me, that was one of the major drivers of me drinking so heavily and so intensely, right? And so I'm sure that there's probably a split here in which both coexist at the same time. The problem is probably getting better and worse at the same time. And, I don't know.
I have no idea or concept of time, but I feel like we've been talking for a while, and I feel like we've covered a whole lot.
Yeah.
So, again, I just want to go back to saying to you, I know I said it at the beginning of the episode, but I want to say it again, very much admire you and admire anyone who goes down that path of sobriety and making decisions for the betterment of their health and their well-being, and also acknowledging that no shade to anyone who drinks, because I love me a cheeky beverage and cocktail and wine too. But I do think it's a very admirable thing to do. And so, thanks for sharing your insight and your story on that. I think it will probably move quite a few people.
Really to reiterate that sentiment, I want to be so clear that this really isn't about judgment, and particularly judging yourself, right? Sometimes when we hear other people's stories, and it means that we kind of cast judgment upon ourselves as if we're doing it wrong. But we approach all of these things with so much compassion, because actually there's so much complexity in all of this. There's kind of these cultural norms and of course our own, the environment that we grew up in, and there's so much to
and the
this.
experiences that we've been faced with that enable us to have to kind of sometimes go down a bit of a destructive path before we come out the other side.
Yeah, that's it. And so it's really important just to hold yourself with compassion and not to compare your story to ours, because of course we're just here to share our own experiences, but that won't or shouldn't dictate your own. But if for some reason this has kind of triggered something in you, or you feel as though this is something that you're struggling with, I would direct you to the National Alcohol and Drug Hotline. The number is 1-800-250-015. The National Alcohol and Other Drug Hotline provides free and confidential advice about alcohol and other drugs, including available treatment options, and automatically will direct whoever calls to the Alcohol and Drug Information Service in the state and territory from which they're calling.
Love that. Thanks for sharing, Zoe. Now, to round out, as we always do, I would like to ask you, my love, what's helping you to slow down at the moment?
Yeah, so over the last week or so, I have made a really conscious decision to not take any calls or listen to any music or podcast while I'm driving. There is very little opportunity for me at the moment just to have my own quiet space, kind of beyond, of course, my meditation practice and things. But that's been really helping me to slow down, just to have a little bit of thinking time in the car. And just to not always have something in my ears, to not be always consuming, but actually just sometimes have time to like chew on some ideas and to think things through in my own space. You? What's helping you to slow down?
At the moment, I have been making a bit more of a conscious effort to go across to the salt water. The weather's starting to get a little bit better, and I just know how much the salty air helps my soul feel settled. And I'm very lucky that I live in a suburb that enables me to do that. And so, it's nice to be able to be back in Elwood when it's absolutely thriving. And so, sunshine, salt water has been a big part of what has been helping me to just chill the fuck out.
Love that. All right. Probably enough for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, jump on, give us a 5-star review, follow along, interact with us on socials. We always love to hear from you guys. So let us know, have you ever been sober curious? Are you currently sober curious? Feel free to share your experiences with us, because as we always say, when we feel connected through our own experiences, we tend to feel less lonely, and also we can inspire each other with new ways and new resources of kind of coping with this busy world that we live in. But otherwise, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If any of the topics we've covered today feel overwhelming, we recommend seeking individual support. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please contact Lifeline on 131114 or 13 Yarn on 139276.